Joining us now is CNN senior military analyst and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Admiral James Stavridis. James Stavridis, he is also a partner at the investment firm, the Carlyle Group, and wrote The Admiral's Bookshelf. Admiral Stavridis, really appreciate you being here. So let's just start with President Vladimir Zelensky. Obviously, high-stakes meeting coming in on Monday, one that did not go well, at least the last time Zelensky was at the White House. What does the Ukrainian leader need to try and get out of Monday's meeting with President Trump?
He needs to be included in the conversation going forward, full stop. And I think it was reasonable for a summit between the United States and Russia as a kind of initial step. But going forward, Zelensky needs to really push for his presence. And I would say, I'll add to that he needs to push for a European presence. Probably the head of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, would be a good additional member of these talks. Let's get it beyond the bilateral U.S.-Russia that occurred a day ago, and let's get into at least a trilateral, including Ukraine. I would say got to include Europe in that conversation as well, Omar.
And, you know, one of the trilateral pushes that we've seen to this point, or the hope from the White House, has been that the trilateral is the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia. I think that is the target that we've seen so far to this point. Again, a long way to go before you get to that possibility at all. But what could the United States do that could bring Putin to the same bargaining table as Zelensky in a meaningful fashion?
The ironic thing in all of this is that as between Trump and Putin, it's President Trump who has all the cards to play. President Trump can inflict an awful lot of damage on the Russian economy by, for example, confiscating $300 billion in Russian reserves in Western banks, another $10 billion in U.S. banks alone. Secondly, President Trump could initiate secondary sanctions. He could go after the Russian shadow fleet that's moving illegal oil all around the world. Militarily, President Trump could supply the Ukrainians with more lethal offensive weapons, notably F-16 aircraft. They've got about 50 to 70 of those in the pipeline. Let's get that number up to about 200. Train the pilots, give them additional surface-to-surface cruise missiles, give them unmanned capability, better cyber. All of those are tools that could be applied by President Trump. And then finally, at the really aggressive end of the spectrum, President Trump could say to Vladimir Putin, look, if you don't come to the table and get into a serious negotiation, not only are we going to apply the economic tools I just mentioned, not only are we going to up-arm the Ukrainians, we're going to seriously consider a NATO mission into Ukraine, a NATO no-fly zone over Ukraine, and ultimately NATO membership. Vladimir, if you want Ukraine to be neutral, you got to get to the bargaining table now, now, now. That's what I hope will be the message conveyed to Moscow.
And for those that didn't get it from your most recent answer, you were NATO Supreme Allied Commander, clearly over a lot of the breadth of options that we have here. But Europe's role, I mean, can't really be understated here. What would you be advising NATO, or I guess what options are on the table for that role right now, for the role that you previously had? What options are on the table from the European perspective?
Yeah, the current Supreme Allied Commander has a bully pulpit to go to all those European nations and say, bring more to the table, more cyber, more intelligence, more of your offensive and defensive weapon systems. He can encourage the Europeans to purchase American weapons, which are then passed on. NATO, under the command of Supreme Allied Commander, can also move the logistics, use the American logistics advantage to move those systems into Ukraine. A lot of that is happening, Omar, but by increasing the flow organizing it and getting Europe on the front edge of it all. That's how you put pressure on Vladimir Putin. That's how you get him to a bargaining table. That's how you resolve this conflict ultimately.
Admiral James Stavridis, always appreciate you taking the time, appreciate the insight.
You bet, Omar. Thank you.